Visions can come from many places. Not all of them are divine. The devil knows how to appear as the Lord. You must be careful because others will believe you. Welcome to Morally Offensive, the podcast most likely to show our boobs to the papal nuncio. I'm Bill.
I'm Stephanie.
And today we are discussing a story about ecstatic visions from the director of RoboCop and Basic Instinct.
This is a podcast about the films condemned or considered morally offensive by the Catholic Church.
I grew up Catholic and now I'm not for reasons, but I'm still fascinated by the religion that raised me. The films we cover are selected from the official film review lists of the Legion of Decency, Rest in Peace, and the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. I'm a motion graphics designer, editor, and DJ.
And I produce film fests focusing on obscure 70s horror, offbeat midnight movies, and all sorts of Euro sleaze, but the good kind.
And together, we are on a journey to watch every film condemned or considered
morally offensive.
Stephanie, we are back for episode 2 on Paul Verhoeven's Benedetta. And we can't do it alone, so we have once again our guest from the Leave, Laugh, Love podcast, Veronica. Veronica, thank you for joining us again.
Hello. Thank you.
Veronica, if you listen to our last episode, actually at one point of her life studied to and wanted to be a nun, wanted to join a convent. She did not, thankfully, so we have her here with us.
Yay!
Thank you for being here with us today.
You're too kind.
Not Sister Veronica. In the previous episode, we got into the sort of setup of Benedetta, the introduction of her supposed powers, and we asked the question, do we think she genuinely believes what she's selling? And I think we decided it's hard to say if she does believe in what she's selling or not. I think as a child, she did. Later on in this movie, I'm not so sure. So as we come into Act 2, the sexual relationship between Benedetta and Bartolomeo is building, and Benedetta is eyeing for more power within the convent, specifically the goal of becoming abbess. Stephanie, can you walk me through the action of Act 2, please?
With pleasure. Act 2 is where Benedetta really starts tightening the screws, as Benedetta rises in influence inside the convent, just as her private life grows more intimate, risky, and crucially impossible to contain. Her relationship with Bartolomeo deepens. Her visions become more useful to the institution, and the line between sanctity and strategy gets even harder to read. Running alongside that is the secondary drama of Mother Felicita and her daughter Christine, whose toxic mother-daughter bond gives the middle act an additional layer of resentment, control, and emotional unraveling, particularly during the second act's climax, Benedetta's orgasms, with a dildo carved out of a wooden Mary notwithstanding, of Sister Christine's public and absolutely horrible act of unaliving herself.
Thank you, Stephanie. You know, this act is interesting. This is where we see Benedetta kind of really coming into her own with these powers, with her stigmata, and with the influence that she's gaining in the community and in the convent. And she's quickly leveraging this to kind of take over, essentially. One of the big bees in the bonnet of people who had a problem with this movie is something we've not really discussed yet, is a wooden statue of the Virgin Mary that Bartolomeo carves for Benedetta, echoing the statue she lost when she first came to the convent. But this statue has something different. Stephanie, please, if you will, explain the statue.
Thanks, Bill. I'm so glad I get to explain the statue.
Wait, can I cut in and say
me.
It wasn't hearkening back to that wooden statue that she came in with. It's the literal statue she came in with. Because when they put the two rooms together and make a double cell for her to go in with, they bring in this random old spiderwebby desk, which is the same dresser from the beginning that has her dress in it, as well as the statue. And Benedetta goes, "Oh, that's the dress I came in with." And she unwraps the dress to hand it to Benedetta, and it has the statue of Mary. And she's like, "Oh my gosh, my mother gave that to me." So it like reappears when Bartolomea moves into Benedetta's cell, because Benedetta has supposedly been ill because of her visions. So she needs round the clock care, which of course can only be provided by Bartolomea.
Of course.
But that's when Mary shows up. And then if you want me to go ahead and do it, like, once they move into their own room together, when she becomes abbess superior, Bartolomea like carves off the feet of the Mary to be smooth, so that the top is still Mary's head and torso, and the bottom is just a smooth, what would you call it? Like a cylinder?
Penile.
Basically,
A phallus.
a dildo. Yeah.
Phallus, yes.
I love the detail where she picks it up and then is like, "Oh, there's still a splinter on here. I got to get that off." And I was like, "Yeah, you do. That's going to hurt. Get some sandpaper up in there. Like, come on."
Oh my God, Veronica, thank you, by the way. Wow. I was saved by the church bell. Oh my God.
I definitely think the sex scenes between these two in Act 2 really harken back to like peak Showgirls Verhoeven. This feels like very much like, sometimes Verhoeven's sex scenes are so over the top and ridiculous that it almost feels like we talked about this with Russ Meyer, Stephanie, like how the sex almost becomes comical because it's so over the top.
Look, there is one thing that Verhoeven loves to do, and that is be the grand guignol of sex scenes in mainstream films. He loves to make the audience uncomfortable. He loves to put genitals in your face. He loves to show the beginning, middle, and end. I mean, we're really like doing it with his characters.
Yeah.
And I screened Basic Instinct a few years ago. Which was some of the like greatest 2 hours and 12 minutes of my life.
I wish I could have stayed for that. I DJ'd the opening, but I had to get home.
Yes. Well,
I know.
Bill and I have similar aesthetic, shall we say. And one of the lines in Basic Instinct where like, I never know whether to laugh or like be in awe is after the fact when Catherine Trammell and Nick the cop Nick have done it for the first time after that insane club scene. She says to him, "Well, what did you think?" And he goes, "I thought it was the fuck of the century." Like,
he thought it was. He thought it. Important point there.
Just the hyperbole behind the man's experience clearly has nothing to do with being a man. Like, just Verhoeven's hyperbolic approach to the mechanic of sex is completely in line with his hyperbolic approach to the mechanics of violence.
Well, and an interesting thing about Joel Esterhaus, who wrote the movie Basic Instinct, the script, is that he now has converted to Catholicism.
Okay.
Joe, if you're listening, Mr. Esterhaus, if you're listening, we are based in Chicago and Milwaukee. Come join us and let's go on a Midwest tour. If you're listening, Joe.
Honestly, it could be a lot of fun. Especially because in 2011, when Mel Gibson was working on his movie version of the Maccabees, and Jewish groups were like, "Don't do that."
Thankfully, I do not, Bill, but I'm glad you do.
So evidently, he commissioned Esterhaus to write the screenplay for Maccabees, which would have been a wild movie. I can't stand Mel Gibson anymore, but God, that is like, I'm kind of curious what that would look like, but I also don't want it to exist. Esterhaus wrote in an interview in 2008, I guess, that Mel Gibson shared the mindset of Adolf Hitler. Okay. So in a February 2012 interview with Andrew Goldman of the New York Times, Goldman said to Esterhaus, Gibson's film The Passion was widely considered anti-Semitic. Then during a 2006 arrest for drunk driving, he ranted that the Jews are responsible for all the wars in the world. Is he the right director for the film about Judah Maccabee? Esterhaus replied, Adam Fogelson, United Pictures chairman, said to Gibson, why do you want to do this story? Mel said, because I think I should. I liked that answer very much. When asked about their shared Catholic faith, Esterhaus said of Gibson, in my mind, his Catholicism is a figment of his imagination. It gets better. The girls are fighting. By April 2012, Warner Brothers had canceled the Maccabee project. The film's last draft was dated February 20th, 2012. Esterhaus claimed the break was caused by Gibson's violent outburst and anti-Semitism, while Gibson blamed a bad script. Esterhaus later wrote a book, Heaven and Mel, about his experiences working with Gibson. Holy shit, I need that book. Oh my God. Oh, wow.
Book club.
Okay, somebody order me a copy of Heaven and Mel right now. Good Lord. Heaven and Mel, that title, that's amazing. There's an audiobook. Who reads the audiobook? I'm sorry, we're rabbit holing on this thing right now. Read by Tim Halligan. Okay. I might have some Audible credits. I need to maybe do something about this because it's only 4 hours and 4 minutes narrated. That's easy. I can blow through that. Wow. Anyway, Mel Gibson.
Anyway,
Joe Esterhaus.
Verhoeven loves to use sex as like just a prying board.
Yes.
To get the audience to open up and just, it's not surrender. It's just submission to the aesthetic, to the themes. Like the only way to like go with this film is just kind of to like accept that Benedetta is doing something, you know, like we have to go along with everyone else too in some ways.
I was going to say something earlier that I didn't manage to say, but evidently the real Benedetta, we Veronica, you brought up how she had visions and they kind of go away by the second and third act. I guess in real life, according to the trial records, she had visions initially, and then they went away for a while because she was like suppressing them. And then when they came back, that's when the stigmata stuff kind of like came in with all of that. But there was like a period where she didn't have them, supposedly, because she was, I guess, quote, I don't know how you suppress visions, because I imagine it's pretty hard to control that if you're just randomly having them. But
I don't know. This is where the charismatic side of me is like, no, that kind of makes sense. You could suppress it, you know. I don't know if you're familiar with being slain in the spirit when you're praying.
Oh, hell yeah.
And you fall over.
Hamana shamana.
Where if you're slain in the spirit, you just fall over, and typically you fall over backwards. And this became so common that often they will have catchers designated to catch, usually tall men, to stand behind the person being prayed with to catch you and gently lay you on the floor.
It's wild because you just start going down and you're like, oh, I'm going down.
People talk about resisting that. You can totally resist that and make that, you know, so you can resist the workings of the spirit within you for sure and be not open to it. God is a gentleman. He won't come in where he knocks and you must open, or I don't know.
He's not the devil. The devil just slides right in. He's like, open hole, I'm going in.
Yeah, boom. Exactly. I don't. Anyway, let's start making a different analogy now.
Wow.
That's what they told me about yoga, okay?
Actually, that's not true, though. You're right. No, I mean, you're totally right.
This is canon Catholic stuff.
Well, I teach yoga, so I'm clearly a vehicle of the devil.
That's why I employed you, Stephanie. You're on the payroll because... Nice. And by payroll, I mean you might get a taco out of this in a year. But
counting on it, Bill. Pure profit.
Someday we'll make money.
I think that like what you just said makes sense. Like from the historically, supposedly she did have visions. It seemed like she maybe would have had visions as a kid, and then the visions, like we come in the middle in the time as an adult where Bartolomea shows up, and that all ramps up to the point of her getting stigmata. So it could have been that. In between was her suppression era historically.
But don't you think that's really a metaphor for suppressing her sexuality? Like, isn't that just the language of self-abnegation in order to remain a nun or in order to have been able to survive in the convent?
Or just being Catholic, to be completely honest. I mean, that suppression of feelings is very much a Catholic thing.
Well, yes, suppression of feelings, but also think about living like in a giant room where you only have sheets separating you from the people who live next to you. You can't even have like a personal outlet in that kind of situation. Like that's very precarious. So you would have there's a unique level of control and suppression, I think, that's going on in the convent for sure.
It is interesting that a lot of the sexuality between her and Bartolomea initially happens through curtains, right? So like we're seeing that division of space violated frequently during these early interactions before they get their own private room. I found that really, I don't know, that just struck me as a visual that was really fascinating.
Right, just sort of moving from one world to another, moving from one space to another, moving from one state to another. And I think those curtains, particularly, especially as we're talking about them in Act 2, sort of serve as the visual language, the grammar of cinema to say that boundaries are dissolving.
Yes.
And things that once separated two people or two ideas or, two religions are becoming more and more diaphanous.
It's interesting as this power struggle goes on. I think one of Benedetta's big mistakes is actually taking over as abbess, because I think she could have kept doing this charade a lot easier. People were taken by the stigmata. They were showing all this respect to her, and they were kind of showering praise on her for this. I think taking over as abbess was a mistake, because that's when the abbess, Mother Felicita, goes to the nuncio, right? And reports everything going on with her. And I think had she kept her head down and not pushed quite that hard, that she could have kept this thing going for a while.
Well, that's an argument to say that it was real and she couldn't, she was only doing what she was divinely told to do.
Right. And that's what she felt.
You make a really good point. Like politically, once you're on top, the only way to go is down,
Yes.
Like she would have had way more of a power structure, way more of a cult of personality as the vice president, as the secretary of state, so to speak. So when you think about, is there any, logic to it? No. So that kind of points to an authenticity of her actions. It was total self-sabotage.
I do love, when she becomes abbess and there's the woman who's dying, and the former abbess says to her, I need to stay with her. I need to take care of her. She needs me here. And Benedetta kind of says, no, you need to be out there praying in the convent with the other nuns. Christina, is like, well, do you want me to go or stay here? Because, she implies that the former abbess is supposed to go because Jesus told her to. And this has one of the coldest lines I've seen in a movie in a long time. She says, Jesus didn't mention you. Damn. Okay.
Yeah.
That is cold as hell. What the hell?
That speaks to another thing that we didn't really touch on in Act 1, and we really see more and more in Act 2, is Benedetta is kind of a sadist. Like, she really gets off on maybe not necessarily the pain, but delivering the pain and then watching somebody go through pain. Like, there's something that you can tell is really appealing to her. And that, to me, is a sign of disingenuousness, because I would assume if somebody was divinely inspired, they would assiduously avoid delivering or enjoying pain.
Well,
but
are you going to bring up Mother Teresa?
I mean, I could. I was just going to stay with the text. Which is that the movie itself, when she has, the visions of Jesus and stuff, and she goes to the priest and she's in confession and says, I saw Jesus and it made me distressed. And he's saying, well, God should only bring joy. And she says, how do I get close to Jesus? And he says, suffering. Suffering is how you get close to Jesus. You should pray for suffering to get Jesus. That's very legit. Lots of people say, St. Faustina in the 1830s, Jesus supposedly, said to her that suffering is the thermometer of God's presence and love within the soul. So the more you suffer, the more you love. The more you suffer, the more God loves you. And then immediately she goes and tells Bartolomea to stick her hand in the boiling water. And then when she talks to the Mother Superior, Mother Superior's like, why did you do that? And Benedetta's like, no, I didn't want her to be hurting. I just thought it would be good for her. And so there's I don't know, there's already the ambiguity of is she weaponizing what the priest said about suffering and using that as her excuse for inflicting suffering upon others? Or is she truly just taking it at face value? Because, okay, here's also the thing, being neurodivergent and thinking a lot about black and white thinking and how the church, the experience of being religious, okay, and the way that you take things at face value, and right, and it you have people having two very different experiences of religion. You have the people who are taking everything literally and think that everything has to be literal, and then you have the people who are like, no, I didn't mean it that way when I said that. So I could totally see Benedetta being a conniving person who's, just being sadistic and then just going to the Mother Superior and being like, oh, well, but the priest just told me that suffering is a way to get close to God. And clearly she needs to be closer to God. So I thought if I made her suffer, she would get closer to God. And I feel so bad. Or she could be weaponizing that. But it could also be genuine, because I definitely was like that very sincerely as a teen and in high school, and would say really insensitive things to people and be like, yeah, well, Jesus didn't tell me what you should do or not do. So it would be perfect for you to stay here because pragmatically that would make sense. And you're not needed. And then all of a sudden everyone's crying and you're like, I didn't know I said something wrong. I just was. So that's, I don't think per se, but there's the more layers of ambiguity in terms of when the sincerity tipping point happened. Although I do agree that the line where she said that to Christine did seem needlessly cruel in a way that she seemed a little bit smug about. She knew she was sort of asserting her dominance in her new position of power in a way that caught me very off guard watching it. Because I was like, oh, she's not actually sincere anymore. Something's happened.
I did find it interesting that when the nuncio dies in Act 3, and we'll get to that, but I do find it interesting that here someone's asking her, did Jesus mention me, or was I mentioned? And she says this very cruel thing, but at the end, she tries to be compassionate and say something to lie, essentially, to comfort him. And he's like, fuck you, I'm going to hell. I know that. You're lying. You've been lying this whole time. And it's so funny that when she tries to do something nice, she's also lying. I
don't know. I didn't see that as being nice. I thought she was mocking him based on the rest of the setting there.
I was torn about it, but it did kind of feel like she was trying just to be oh, you're going to be fine. You're going to paradise. Or maybe in her mind, the politically expedient thing to do would be to at least present an outward vision of I'm having mercy on him by saying this.
Sure.
And he calls her out and says, no, you're still lying. I'm going to hell. I know that. I'm getting everybody pregnant up in here. I'm going to hell. Come on.
Up in this bitch.
So then why did he even ask her then if he knew? You know what I mean?
I mean, in my sense, in my mind, I was thinking maybe he was testing her. Maybe he was trying to see if she would say that. Was she trying to save her ass? I don't know. It felt like he was testing her in a way, even till the end there.
Well, here's the thing. Benedetta really understood that Christine was more of a threat than anyone else at that point, because she was a loose cannon. She had the advantage, or at least I'm sure Benedetta assumed she had the advantage of the Mother Superior being her mother, of Felicita being her mother. And I also think that Christine was able to see Benedetta in a way that nobody else was. And just as Benedetta said at the end of the second act, well, when I'm with Bartolomea, the pleasure that she gives me is how God speaks through me, or something like that. I thought it was very perceptive and cold to begin to freeze Christine out, weaponizing the respect, the power, the latitude she was receiving because of the visions. I mean, it's all very tied up, but the long and the short of it is Christine's journey from somebody who believed just as deeply as Benedetta did, but it was not the right beliefs. There was only one way for her to get out of that, and that was to unalive herself, which I think is one of the most overlooked, like, shattering engines of the film, because once Christine is gone, Felicita has nothing left to lose. And if you really think about the narrative thrust of what begins the third act, it is Felicita's grief, because she now understands that there's no one left to take Benedetta down but her.
Right.
But the second act's removal of Christine as a character, I think, is very symbolic of Benedetta. Like, that was one of the last vestiges of Benedetta in her old life, in her life as just a sister. You know, Christine knew more about Benedetta than was expedient for Benedetta herself.
The scene with the comet is very striking. The red lighting and everything really creates a mood surrounding the whole event.
And just seeing the mother, seeing Felicita,
yep,
deny her daughter. Maybe it's 3 times. Maybe I'm doing a Judas thing, but
Peter denied Jesus 3 times.
Okay, something like that. Grief that this mother is feeling for this daughter, I think, is one of the most authentic narratives of emotion that we see. Like, we finally see Felicita's interiority, what's going to bring her real pain. And that is so far removed from Benedetta's experience. Like, the 2 women, Felicita and Christine, arguably, at least to my eyes, had a way more authentic spiritual experience.
Right.
Between the 2 of them than Benedetta even claimed to have. I just think it's such a the complexities and the nuance and just the shock, the grief of that character's act. It is so brilliant, and it really underscores the insanity of what happens in the third act, because without Felicita's grief, without her complete unmooring, there's Benedetta could be doing this indefinitely.
Now, something I do want to talk about in this act is the Inquisitor who kind of arrives with the Nuncio. It's kind of a disturbing scene when they finally interrogate Bartolomeo. And I do think we need to talk a little bit about the Inquisition. Not overstate it, but just talk a little bit about it. You know, I think in the context of this movie, this is supposed to kind of indicate like a actual Inquisitor from Rome coming in. Now, torture was not something that came from the Roman Inquisition. Okay. Torture was primarily associated with the more political Spanish Inquisition, which, you know, was instituted by Catholic monarchs in Spain, and it expanded beyond Spain to elsewhere. But this feels like a very Paul Verhoeven creative license in the movie, I would say. I don't know. Like, Veronica, what did you think about bringing in an Inquisitor into this, especially one using torture?
I guess historically I'm not up to snuff on all my Inquisitor stuff, because I thought that was dramatized and feeds into the nunsploitation side of cinema, definitely. And in general, like female torture porn type of stuff. However, I didn't find it so far-fetched, because I mean, there's in The Hunchback of Notre Dame, the Deacon Frollo of the Notre Dame Cathedral has Esmeralda. Like, the lines between the political and the religious prosecution does get blurred a lot. There's violent torture there to try to extract a confession from her. And like you mentioned, I think that was also the case for Joan of Arc. So I thought it, was certainly possible that there was potentially some torture. I didn't think about it too hard, honestly.
Yeah, it depends on regionally where you're at, because torture was used, like I said, beyond Spain. The most famous example of where torture was used was in the Spanish Inquisition, but it was usually state sanctioned torture. Like you said, the lines back then blurred between church and state so much. If you want to know why we want separation of church and state in this country and why it was important to the founders, I mean, the founders of this country knew about the witch trials in Boston, and they had come from Europe knowing all of this.
Especially in Italy, like an incredibly Catholic, city-states. Was it, do we have any idea, was it specifically a crime, what they were doing together? Would that have been a political state crime that they could have gone to jail for or be prosecuted by the state for? I was
trying to figure out if it was more of a state crime or more of a church matter. And like I said, it becomes blurred because of this torture with an inquisitor. The idea that they jump straight to torture is crazy to me. I don't think that's how this would have gone down during this time period where this takes place. I do think you're right. It's Verhoeven leading into the nunsploitation tropes. It is very male gazy, but I mean, it is Paul Verhoeven, so I guess I go in expecting that. But it does feel a little too titillating for violence against her, and I think that's why it's one of the scenes in the movie that really bothers me, because of the way it's being shot and framed and played. It just feels a little over the top. One thing I went down a rabbit hole on is the Pear of Anguish they use. There's so much academic debate about what this thing was used for, if it was used for torture. Other people suggested it was used for torture. Then there's debate about when it was invented. Some people claim it wasn't invented until the 16th century or later. This is the 1500s, 1600s. It existed. It's debatable how common these items were. And unfortunately, a lot of these lines are blurred by sensationalist historical accounts of torture, because, people love that stuff. People love reading about violence and torture in the Middle Ages. So to sell tickets to a torture museum, you're going to play it up a little bit. So I'm not sure how likely the exact scenario shown here would have happened. But again, so much of cinema has played loose with this that it's not like I'm going to get hung up on it. I'm just curious, because it was something that I was spending a lot of time searching about, just being like, well, would the nuncio have brought an inquisitor with him? Would the inquisitor done more than just grilled her, or would there have been jumping to torture like this? I find it unlikely, but I get that Verhoeven's going for what is cinematically best for the movie that conveys the emotional truth, which that makes sense to me.
Bill, you said the scene made you uncomfortable. I have to tell you, I couldn't even watch it. I skipped ahead.
Okay.
I covered my eyes for a bit. I just, it's funny, because I program all those strange, violent, very bloody, very sexualized films, and I love it. But something about the graphic, intimate horror, just again, that delivery of pain.
Yes.
Man, I cannot deal with that. So I agree with you. I'm, whether or not it happened, I suppose is not even what we're debating. Verhoeven, even for me, can go a bit too far sometimes. And I think that scene could have been actually far more powerful by showing less.
Yes. And I apologize, Veronica. I had a moment of oh my God, I asked Veronica to be on this episode, and I did not realize just how crazy this was.
Oh my gosh. It was fine. I think it's funny. I actually had I sort of thought it was the explicit nature of that scene sort of contrasted with the ecstatic, sensual scenes when they were together earlier in the film.
Interesting.
And so there was a lot of contrast there. So it didn't necessarily feel like just thrown in gratuitous torture, but cinematically, I felt like it was doing some work and torturing her to try to get a confession out of her about this horrible thing she had done. But they're the ones doing horrible things to people and doing torture.
The hypocrisy of it all.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And why have they stripped her down to do that? Why do they have her naked? Why do they have her in a vulnerable position?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that also that helped highlight it, whether that's I was going to say whether that's realistic or not, but I don't know. Realistically, I feel like that's totally something they could have done to humiliate and degrade her, since they had all this power, and that was the point of the whole thing.
And men in power and religion don't necessarily have a great track record with how they treat women, so it's
exactly.
You know.
So that's what I thought, like, sort of that scene plus the whole concept and idea of the Mother Superior even having a daughter in the first place. Nobody talks about it. Nobody mentions that. Nobody gets mad at Mother Superior for having a kid, especially a kid who lives there. I mean, that's like, everybody knows, like, if you're going to have a kid, at least send them away to a different convent. You know what I mean? Like, they don't explain in the film whether this was before she became a nun and they joined together, or if it was after. The fact she's the abbess is crazy. Anyway, so the sort of the like comparisons between all of the, you know, implied sexuality and the naked scenes, you know, all sort of like was creating some sort of commentary.
That's an interesting take I hadn't thought about, with the contrast between the nudity of the sex scenes versus the violence being, you know, created, brought into this environment by the church authorities. Interesting take. So moving into Act 3. Act 3 turns everything outward as Benedetta's private drama becomes a public crisis and the church moves in to investigate, expose, and reassert control, all with the specter of the plague hovering over the proceedings. What had been simmering inside the convent becomes a full spectacle of accusation, trial, punishment, fear, and institutional theater, culminating in Benedetta's public reckoning. The ending refuses clean moral resolution, which is exactly right for a film so committed to ambiguity, because Benedetta remains elusive even when she is formally judged and nearly destroyed by the machinery of power. So in Act 3, you know, this is when we're getting into the trial. Benedetta is imprisoned and interrogated under church authority. At the same time, the nuncio has, after warnings not to enter the convent or this area, has brought the plague with him, whether he knows it or not, or is intending to or not. In this Act 3, I find the feet washing scene of Benedetta washing the feet of the nuncio particularly interesting. And this is when she first finds signs of him having the plague, when she finds like a scab or something on his leg while she's washing it. Stephanie, what was your take on kind of the implications of the scene with the feet washing?
So that scene to me, first of all, it reminded me very much of the scene. Maybe I'm getting my Jesus movies wrong, but isn't
Yes, it's a thing that Jesus does on Holy Thursday. He does it at the Last Supper. It's part of Holy Thursday.
Oh my God.
Big tradition in the church.
Awesome. I'm glad I'm traditional at something. Isn't there like a similar scene in The Last Temptation of Christ?
Absolutely.
Where somebody...
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yep. Okay. So the thing about that scene, first of all, is it's intimacy. And in Benedetta acting or doing the act of the feet washing, she is able to talk to the nuncio, to see the nuncio, to just be very physically intimate with him. And there's a real connection between them in terms of their flesh. Benedetta has been able to sort of come into her own body. We know that the nuncio is a sexually active, very attractive man. But what I really found from this scene, and I'm perfectly prepared to accept that this is just total bullshit and total nonsense. I mean, what else is new out of my head? But when he said to Benedetta, when the nuncio said to Benedetta, "You have the seductive touch of a whore," and Benedetta said, "I certainly do not, and I'm not going to ask you how you know that." Immediately, because there's something very wrong with me, I thought this kind of alluded to the Mother Superior's daughter, to Felicita's daughter, Christine.
Interesting.
And I thought it could have meant that in her past, Felicita was a working gal, and perhaps this, the nuncio, was one of her partners. And we know that priests and men in power impregnated women in the faith fairly regularly. And I was wondering if maybe Christine was his daughter.
Another
and
uncomfortable fact.
Yeah. I'm sorry?
I said another uncomfortable fact.
Another uncomfortable fact. But look, facts are facts, uncomfortable or not. And the way the nuncio was able to mitigate or hush or basically remove this act from his public perception was to put Felicita into the abbey as an abbess or as somebody who kind of had her own right to power. Whether or not I'm correct, that's kind of irrelevant, because the long and the short of it is, this is a very quiet, very loaded scene. And this is really where, in 20 minutes, the film is going to be over, because one of them has to die at this point. Like, it's spy,
A couple things while you were saying that I kind of want to back up, I guess, a little bit, is that the way that she said that could have just been like, LOL, I'm not going to ask why you know what that is. But like, if there was this possibility that the Mother Superior used to be a working woman, that she had a past with the nuncio, that she didn't come by her power honestly. I mean, the Mother Superior doesn't seem to make a big secret of the fact that she doesn't necessarily believe. She's just devoted her life to the church anyway. And she said, I've made that decision a long time ago, so this is just the way it is. And I'm going to support the power games of the church. That would all sort of back up your theory. And I would totally think that Benedetta would have some knowledge of that and would twist that into the bishop a little bit to be like, also, I know the whole like backstory of what's been going on between you and the Reverend Mother and this convent, in a very subtle way, if that did happen to be true.
When he arrives, Benedetta has supposedly died, right? We don't know why. It's mysterious causes.
I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yep. And the nuncio shows up. They put the fingers on the eyes, and she just jolts up alive. It's a miracle. And that the priest who's had her back this whole time just says like, oh, of course it's Benedetta, but they had been, you see them digging a grave. Like, it's not even like it's a put on. It's like everyone thinks she's legitimately dead and she's revived.
Well, she told them to dig a grave, Bill. Like, yeah. Remember?
Yeah, I remember. Well, that's the thing. She set up this grift. Like, she set up this thing. She convinced them this was going to happen because she knows everything that's going to happen to her, right? There's a scene I wish I'd written down where she says to somebody, based on information she can observe about them, that this is going to happen, this or that happened, or this is going to happen to them. It's very much cold reading. It's what psychics do. It's, they pay attention to the details of your outfit, of how you hold yourself. They ask you information that could inform other things about them, so that whatever information you send them away with is likely to happen in their future, because it's vague enough, but also based on real details about you that you could believe that what the psychic told you is true. Benedetta is doing that in this movie to people. She's reading people. She is cold. She is really good at cold reading. If you watch throughout the movie, and something I started to notice probably about halfway through. It's a fun detail about her, and kind of, again, leads into this idea that she is, much like Christina accused her of earlier in the movie, she's a fake. Like, Christina, when she finds the shard of glass, and then the shard of glass kind of reappears later at the end of Act 3. And she's confronted by Bartolome at the very end. Like, just tell me the truth for once. Tell me what is going on. And Benedetta's whole thing is she's not able to be read. She doesn't want to be read. She doesn't want to be genuine with people. Even if what she's feeling is genuine, she does not want to reveal her real self. And I think that's the character throughout the movie.
But isn't that what the church teaches us we should do? Not reveal our true selves, how we really feel? Hey,
look at that. Funny how that works. No, it totally makes sense that a woman who is she's trying to hide the fact that she's having this lesbian love affair would not show her genuine true self to the other nuns and the people in the community, right?
I totally agree.
Well, I think there's a lot of hiding. I think this film is about a lot of hiding.
Yes.
And the institutions, in our case, the physical spaces, in Benedetta's case, the ambiguity of how do we know spirituality? How do we live something that is by design completely inexplicable? And this film, it's sort of Shakespearean, and they all died basically,
Right.
And they all died. What was all of that for? What was all of that for? What did that achieve for anyone? I mean, like, what was all that? The theatricality, the spectacle, the secrecy, like, isn't that completely against the teachings of the church? I mean, what do I know? But again, just like the hypocrisy at such, at writ Verhoeven large really struck me throughout the third act. Like everyone kind of got what was coming to them, but it didn't feel really good. Like, I'll tell you, at the end of RoboCop, which this second watching of Benedetta reminded me a lot of this sort of corporate evil that Verhoeven really just distilled in RoboCop, the Nuncio in particular.
Yes, no, the Nuncio definitely reminds me of RoboCop in that way.
Right.
Yeah.
But like in RoboCop, it was for profit. It was to get back to the shareholders, to please the old man.
Oh, the old man in this one is God. God is the old man, or at least the church. Maybe not God, but the church is the old man, if that makes sense. Right?
Okay. I suppose it does. But again, like, what was it? Like, there was a fire and there was the plague, and then someone showed them the boils, and then they all ran, and then there was more fire. Like, I mean, that's Burning Man. Like, what's the point?
And this comes back to Flesh and Blood, which comes to a similar conclusion. I mean, Flesh and Blood, it starts with they're giving communion to the Crusaders, and it's this heroic thing they're doing. And by the end of the movie, everybody's died of the plague. Spoiler alert for Blood by Paul Verhoeven. But I mean, that's the whole idea, is like, what is the point of fighting this stupid religious war when we are all, nature is going to eat us alive? Like, we're just going to die from disease. And I think, Benedetta's kind of asking some of those same questions in a different way, of course. I love that the Papal Nuncio tries to hide Felicita when she shows signs of the plague. And then she kind of shows up as the angel of death at the actual, I guess, attempted execution of Benedetta that fails spectacularly.
Yes, it does.
It's really powerful imagery. I love she gives him the Judas kiss, the kiss of peace, as it were, on the cheek. I mean, I love that detail. And, they try to light Benedetta on fire, which is, again, harkening back to Joan of Arc. Again, they mentioned Joan of Arc during the torture scene. So this movie, as much as it's interested in the source material, it's also echoing like Joan of Arc and other martyrs from this era, and also women who were burnt at the stake for having visions or speaking heresy or blasphemy.
I think the real difference, though, is that Joan of Arc, for example, and I think that's an easy, or not, that's not the right word, but an appropriate analogous woman in history. Joan of Arc has a very clean, moral ending.
Yes.
Like, she is now a saint, right? There's no more ambiguity about what she did or who she was. Her story has been canonized, and I'm very lucky. I get to go to France fairly often. And if Joan of Arc was somewhere, or they think she was somewhere, like, you see plaques, like, it's cool.
They moved her chapel here, Stephanie. We have Joan of Arc's chapel from when she was a child in Milwaukee. They moved it brick by brick to Marquette University.
What?
Yes.
I gotta come visit. We gotta go see Joan of Arc.
Yeah, I have not been yet. It's on my list of things to do. It's the oldest building in Milwaukee.
Oh my God. Yeah. Field trip, morally offensive field trip. Anyway.
Well, we could do that, and then we could go to the Catholic cult town up north of here called Nazian.
I'm so there.
And I think it's also haunted. I think it's like a cult town that was haunted.
Of course it is, Bill. Do you hear yourself?
More details on a future episode. I need to confirm this.
That's right. Stay tuned.
I need to know this. Oh my gosh.
Birthday. Look, Joan of Arc's gotten out of this mire. Like, she's a canonized woman with her own narrative that ends with her redemption and therefore our redemption. But Benedetta does not have this at all.
No.
And in fact, it is the ambiguity that is her story. That there is no end. There is nothing. Like, what have we learned from her?
Right. Well, and God help you if you tried to question Joan of Arc's here, if you tried to say like, well, Joan of Arc heard voices. Is that normal? Like, do we believe that she actually heard God, or did she hear voices? Was she perhaps struggling with some sort of mental health issue? I mean, I'm about to get canceled for saying that on this podcast, but like, that is something like we can't say about Joan of Arc because she's so revered even outside of Catholicism. She's a symbol for so many people. And like, I'm not going to tell somebody's grandma not to go venerate, Our Lady of Guadalupe because it has questionable origins, like it's just, what's the point?
Those women have transcended any of the residual ambiguity, any of historical ambiguity. They've earned, or I suppose crafted, a narrative about their lives.
Yes.
But again, the reason why we're talking about Benedetta is because she's betwixt and between. She's here and she's nowhere. She's a miraculous being who was on trial for being a fraud. Like, she's nothing and nowhere, but she never told us where she wanted to be or who she wanted to be. She was just, I don't want to say a hostage to fate, but maybe this was just aberrant enough to get people's attention.
Well, and I think something sad about Benedetta that I'll bring back to our episode on the devils is that, the story of the devils of Loudun, the Loudun possessions, is essentially these women who were nuns. They acted out. It became kind of viewed as like, oh, they're possessed. And it became this like spreading thing among them. And then they became a tourist attraction, and they made money for the city and for, the diocese they were in, right? They were essentially like a tourist trap. But also for those women specifically, and this is what's really sad, is it was this thing of like, oh, people are coming to see us. We have agency. We are performers. We're the lead. We're the star of this thing, right? In a world where we can't have agency, where we are, essentially used to negotiate land rights or property swaps, right? We have this agency as the lead of this story as the Loudun possessed nuns. And people are coming to see us, and we're making money off of it. But what happens with the Loudun nuns is eventually people just they get bored. Like, it's the flavor of the month, and then the nuns are kind of left to fend for themselves, and the money runs out, and it's just kind of a sad, long decline of an ending, like this peak thing, and then the attention goes away, and they pass into obscurity. And Benedetta, it's the same thing. She doesn't get a clean martyrdom like Joan of Arc did. She gets basically put away and then dies at age 70 quietly. And I find that really profoundly sad, honestly. Like, she had this moment where she was able to have agency and be at the center of things and have people pay attention to her and respect her. That's the thing. She had respect, and they listened to her. And then that gradually just fades away. And Veronica, I'm curious to hear like what you think of her story.
I think it would have been interesting to see some more of that end of her life, how she lived it out in the convent. It just sort of, the way the movie has it, she's living in the middle of a field with Bartolomea, supposedly riding out the plague. And then one day she gets up and says, okay, I got to go back to the convent. I've pledged my life to God. I got to go back there. And it's like, well, why would you? There's no need, and everything's fallen apart now. Is she trying to get back her power? Was all of that just incidental, and she does want to go back to her life in the convent and just have the simple life? I don't know. It makes me super curious, like, beyond the cinematography of it all and the intentional ambiguity of the storytelling.
Yeah.
Like, what was actually going on there? I've read other stories. I was not familiar with the story of Benedetta going into this, but I've read other stories of mystics in religious life who are not saints and would never be called saints because they were also called into question for being frauds and had sketchy behavior, like one nun, and I always forget her name, so I can't even tell you who it was, who claimed that, who like was a mystic, but then supposedly had a pact with Satan where Satan took her soul for 10 years and then like visited her.
Yes.
Listen, visited her in a cell and she got pregnant and then gave birth to a baby, but then the baby was immediately whisked away by Satan. And so then you just have to wonder, like, is this all just like delusions, or was it intentional on her part? Did somebody actually come and she had sex and she got pregnant and she just made all this stuff up about Satan sleeping with her? So that was, I don't know, very sensationalized stories. And you wonder, like, how much of this was a woman who was victimized by the oppressive church and convent structures, and how much of it, you know, was she trying to have autonomy, and how she, you know, like, I don't know.
Well, it's like, did a member of the clergy assault her, and then she was terrified to call them out because of the power structure. So she's like, well, Satan did it. You know, like what's the easiest way to not get myself in trouble here, right? Yeah.
Exactly. But instead of that, the implication is usually that some rando guy, you know, seduced her and she fell in, you know, that it was an affair of passion instead of something non-consensual and abusive. And that's like, I'm left with a lot of those same questions after watching Benedetta, just in terms of like, I'm so curious what actually happened back when Benedetta was alive and what has been sensationalized in her story, what was sensationalized at the time with the recording of the story, and how much was she framed or demonized for this accused affair that she was having with Bartolomea. I don't know. Like,
right, because we know she was accused, but we don't know the details of if that's confirmed or not. So,
right. Or like, you know, maybe that was totally made up because she was having these mystical experiences and she was the abbess and people were angry. And so they made stuff up about her. Like, I have no idea what of this would actually be real. And I wish that I could know what is actually real. Because you know what I think? I think that if there is a God and he does give people stigmata, that he would give somebody stigmata even if they were having lesbian sex. I want to believe in a God who would give a lesbian nun the stigmata. Okay? So
God, if you're listening, give a lesbian nun stigmata.
There you go.
I'll go to confession and show up to mass once.
I'm not doing shit.
One time I'll see. And you gotta put on a show if you want me to keep going. You gotta like really make it good. Okay. So
guys, here's one final analysis, particularly about the final act, but really more about the Benedetta arc. I totally agree that in a contemporary analysis, mental illness is a perfectly, I don't think reasonable is the right word, maybe logical or realistic event that was happening. But I did some reading about that myself because I wondered, well, maybe this was just schizophrenia, or maybe this was epilepsy, you know, neurological events that even to our eyes are still very scary, are still very unknowable. But maybe what Benedetta was doing, or maybe really speaking to the abuse, to forced acts of sex, is that the language of mysticism, the language of religion, and the exchanges that were specific to that convent, you know, like every place sort of has its own lingo and its own vibe. That was the only language she knew how to explain what happened. So, Bill, it wasn't that somebody wanted to call somebody out. It's that she didn't know she could, A, and B, did not have access to the themes, the implications of saying this was an assault, because though that language simply did not exist. And we are all speaking the vernacular of our times at all times. And maybe these visions and maybe this relationship and, you know, maybe the trial and maybe what did or didn't happen to her was just her trying to explain herself using slang, using the vernacular, using the lingua franca.
That's a different take too. I mean, we all have our own opinion of this. I think it's an interesting movie. I think there's a lot of ambiguity, and it's hard to say exactly what the intent was a lot of times, because Verhoeven is famously oblique sometimes about his intent.
I think that's a very compelling thought. I like it.
Yeah. So I'm curious, what did we all think about this movie? Does it earn our imprimatur? Did we like it? Would we recommend it to somebody? Do we have reservations about it? First, I'd love to hear from our guest, Veronica. What did you think of this movie? Do you give it your papal seal of approval?
You know, I think I have much more of an appreciation for this after talking to you both about it for 3 hours and getting your breakdown of some of the cinematography, because I thought it was good when I watched it, but I didn't love it as much as I was expecting to. I think because I didn't know going into it and was very caught off guard by the ambiguity of Benedetta as a character.
Yes.
And I was like waiting for it to answer my questions, and it didn't answer any of my questions, all of my questions about his character. But with more time, it has given me lots, like, there's a lot to sink your teeth into. So I think ultimately my mind has been changed. And yes, it would get my papal seal of approval.
Woo! All right.
Wow.
Oh yeah, that's such a high
Changing
compliment to
lives,
us.
Bill.
It just took us 3
you
hours.
guys are great. Yeah, that's yeah. No, but I just mean, like, because I don't have some of the same. I don't know. I was just watching the movie, like, what is going on?
Yeah.
And I've only seen it the once and wasn't able to appreciate all of the storytelling that was going on and how a lot of that was the point of the film a little bit.
Right. And I think us having familiarity too with Paul Verhoeven helps, because we kind of knew what to expect.
Yeah.
Like when the crazy stuff happened in the movie, we were just like, oh, Paul.
Yeah.
He's back at it again.
Sure. Uncle Paul.
Stephanie, what did you think of this movie? And I'm curious, okay, both what did you think of this movie? Does it get your imprimatur? But also, where does this fall in the Verhoeven catalog? I'm curious, like, where you place it roughly.
Somehow I knew you were going to ask me that. I just really knew.
Like, our friendship started early on with you texting me about RoboCop, okay? So, like, this has been building up to this for a while.
You know, Bill, there is nothing saying I won't text you later tonight or tomorrow about RoboCop. Like, that's just an ongoing, theme in my head.
RoboCop's a key part of our friendship.
It is, as it should be most people's, really.
I'm from the land of the RoboCop statue, so, we
gotta go.
I know, it's finally up
Milwaukee.
after all these years. It happened. No, not Milwaukee. That's Detroit. Detroit has the statue.
I know, but we got to start in Milwaukee to see Joan of Arc's house.
Joan of Arc.
And then we got to go to Detroit to worship at the RoboCop statue.
I love that. That's a good road trip, honestly.
Okay.
And we'll skip Chicago.
Yeah. Been there, done that. So, I mean, Verhoeven's like my boyfriend. He doesn't know he's my boyfriend, but he is. Like, I've been watching his films for so long that in many ways, like, they're sort of part of my formative years,
Yeah.
Good, bad, or indifferent. Like, if somebody wanted to put on a shadow cast of RoboCop, I could do all the roles. There's not one role in that film I'm not completely literal. Like, I just know them all. And so asking me, do I give this film my imprimatur? The answer is yes. I'm going to be very candid with you guys. I think the film is a bit too long. Okay. I think it could have been a tighter,
yes,
more punchy ambiguity of an ending.
I think so too.
Had it been edited 10 minutes, it wasn't like, it's not a lot of cuts I would have made, but I think it's a bit rambly. Unlike something like a RoboCop, where every scene, every line, every bit of lighting, every angle is so tight. It's so mean. It's so lean. This one was a little more florid, but given the subject matter, maybe that's how it is. But yes, I would absolutely recommend this film. And in terms of where I put it in the Verhoeven canon, you know what? I've really tried to love this film, and I just don't.
Okay.
But I really like the film. And I think unlike a Basic Instinct, a RoboCop, a Fourth Man, to me, an Elle, I love Elle. Like, those films to me are not flawless, but they're perfect. And this film is not perfect. So it's probably it's in the lower top 10.
Yeah. That makes sense to me. I'm kind of feeling the same way. This definitely gets my imprimatur. Like, I'd recommend it to people who can handle it. I think that's like the caveat, is like casually recommending it to people you don't know that well, unless you're coming on our podcast, in which case all bets are off. I think I would be careful about that just because of the nature of the material. But I think that the movie's really doing interesting stuff. It's obviously a very personal subject for Verhoeven. I love him really finally like leaning back into his religious interests again. I know that doesn't appeal to everyone, but I think that like seeing him do the thing he's been wanting to do a long time is really interesting. I'm hoping he can make his Jesus movie before he dies. I'm sure it'll be fine. I don't know if it'll be great, but it'll be bonkers, and that's exciting. Verhoeven is just an interesting guy, and for him to kind of mature into this style, but still maintain elements of what he's known for and kind of his sort of signature ways of pushing the boundaries of good taste in cinema within a religious framework and talking about very heavy, like serious, real religious themes. This is a crazy movie. It reminds me a lot of like something like maybe a less comical Buñuel movie, like Exterminating Angel, perhaps, where you have this contrast between very serious, very real spiritual conversations and talks about Catholicism and faith, and even looking at just the role of women during this time period in the church. And then you cut to the papal nuncio, and a lady just whips out her titty and milk starts flowing. It's so weird. And that's why, again, I'd be careful who I recommended it to, but also like, it's a worthwhile watch. It's just not a masterpiece. It's not a great movie. It's a good movie that I enjoy watching, and I think it's a real good conversation starter. It's a fascinating movie. So I'd say see it for those reasons. But you're right. It's not a Basic Instinct. It's not a RoboCop. It's not Starship Troopers, which I know you and I are split on, but I love Starship Troopers. I think it's a brilliant satire. Total Recall is another one I love. So I do like this movie. I think it's good, and I think it's worth seeing.
Amen.
Well, listen, Veronica, thank you so much for putting up with our long epic of a podcast recording session with interruptions by ambulances, dog noises, and hail tonight.
Hail.
We had
hail. Weather.
It's been certainly a crazy evening for sure, but thank you so much for having me on. I loved getting to watch this movie and come on the show.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Let me ask you, where can people find you? What are you up to? And when are new episodes of Leave, Laugh, Love coming?
That's a great question. So you can find us at Leave, Laugh, Love Pod on Instagram for updates. The podcast is on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you find your podcasts. We have 2 more episodes that should be coming in the next few weeks. And then we're recording a book club series in May. So that should be coming out this summer about a whole bunch of different books about Catholicism, deconstruction, politics, faith. I'm super excited about the book list and the guest list that we've had prepared. And I've had a lot of fun reading the books that we've collected for the book club. So anyway, that'll be super fun. So if you follow us on Instagram, you will get all the updates leading up to that.
That's so cool. Thank you again for joining us. I'm glad you liked the movie and got something out of it. And you brought great insight that, I couldn't provide for sure, especially from a firsthand account. So thank you again.
Of course. Thank you for thinking of me after reading this movie. And I've been super excited for the Nunsploitation series. I was not aware that this was like a theme in Hollywood, the whole Nunsploitation thing. So I've been learning a lot, and I've been like, this is my
awesome.
jam.
I'm glad you've been listening. Well, that about wraps it up for this episode of Morally Offensive. If you like what you heard, please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast in your app of choice. This absolutely helps us gain attention and raise awareness about the show. Join us next time as we'll be continuing our Filthy Habits series with a film that is as much giallo as it is a nunsploitation film. The film was labeled a video nasty in England and is based on the real events surrounding a murderous nun turned serial killer. That's right, we are going to be watching Anita Ekberg in The Killer Nun. Thanks again for listening, and as always,
go and sin no more.
Okay, give me 1 second. We're having hail here. I gotta close the window.
It's because we're blaspheming.
I've angered the Old Testament God. It's hailing now.
Welcome to my world.